Okay, we'd like to call this regular Board of Education meeting to order. Mr. Becker, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Suzette, can you do the roll, please?
Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Ms. Deal. Here. Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Mrs. Lee. Here. Mr. Keller.
Here.
And President Lee is excused tonight.
Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Dr. Lexman or board members, do we have any modifications to the agenda?
We have no changes.
Okay, then we will move on to item 6, the superintendent's report.
Great. Thank you and good evening, everybody. We'll start with 6.1, the legislative update. We've heard some of this first piece of information already, that Wisconsin is falling further behind in per pupil spending. Recently released data from the U.S. Census Bureau show that 2020 Wisconsin per pupil spending on elementary and secondary education ranked 25th highest in the nation, or 5.6% below the national average. And in comparison, in 2002, Wisconsin per pupil spending ranked 11th highest in the nation, 11% above the national average. So it's really the caps on school revenue and the 21 to 23 state budget may drive additional drops in Wisconsin's ranking in upcoming years. Per pupil spending in Wisconsin increased by 48.6% between 2002 and 2020, the third smallest increase of any state, behind only Idaho and Indiana. And so we're hoping that as things evolve, that per pupil increases will come back around. The preliminary general aid estimates, so that on Friday, July 1st, as required by state law, DPI released the estimates of general school aid amounts each public school district will receive for the 22-23 school year. These amounts are unofficial estimates intended to assist school districts to develop the 2022-23 school year budgets. Then at the federal level, a federal judge must reevaluate student ban on t-shirts with gun images. In a most recent legal update, the Renning, Lewis and Lacey law firm reviews an important recent U.S. Court of Appeals decision concerning the ability of school officials to restrict the First Amendment rights of students as to speech and expression. School administrators faced with similar situations should focus on the specific facts involved, such as, is a student expressing a particular message? For example, is the student engaged in speech or expression? Thereafter, the focus should be on whether the speech or expression will result in a material and substantial disruption. For example, what is the current environment? Are students expressing fear? What is the impact of recent events? So recent school shootings. In short, even if a student demonstrates that wearing clothing depicting firearms is protected speech or expression under the First Amendment, if school administrators can demonstrate they took action to prohibit the student from wearing clothing depicting firearms, therefore restricting speech or expression, because of the likelihood of material and substantial disruption to the school. So the action of the school administrators will likely be upheld. So there's a lot of likelies in that, but it's one that we'll also be working with our school leaders on as we launch the new school year. Okay, we'll go on to 6.2. That is the recognitions, and it's typical in the summer. They're not as many. So from Recreation and Community Services Department, the Recreation and Community Services Department wants to acknowledge all of the department administrators and summer staff that donated their time to help make the City of West Allis Independence Day parade a success. We'd also like to recognize all of our department program participants that joined us and marched in the parade. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone in Highland Park, Illinois, that were affected by the senseless and tragic act of violence at their parade. And then going on to 6.3, so just some updates and information items. So first on response to public comments. So first on June 27th, we heard from one member of the public regarding use of funds related to the referendum and the salary increases. So even though it was criticized as being fiscally irresponsible, I think that these expenditures, both of them, are entirely appropriate and are in fact fiscally responsible. The costs for the referendum that were cited were included far more than just the referendum investment. So what we invested for the referendum really came down to some printing, the survey that was done, and mailings. Right, so that was really it in terms of the cost. The larger costs that the speaker cited were related to the development of the long-range facility master plan. So the hiring of Ray Architects and CG Schmidt Construction. We would have invested those dollars into those plans and reports anyways. So if the board decided at the end of the facility master planning process not to go to referendum, we would have spent that $100,000+ and appropriately so. This is one of those perfect examples of where knowledge is power. So we know the condition of our buildings and what they need. And so I think it was an entirely responsible investment. And then there was also criticism for the salary increases. And what's I think difficult for members of the community to understand as a result of Act 10, that we are limited to what we can collectively bargain or negotiate with our teachers. And it is limited to base wages only. Any other subject of collective bargaining is actually prohibited. And so this idea that we should be bargaining over, how much employees or teachers pay as their portion of healthcare versus how much raise they get, we're not allowed to do that. And it really takes away a lot of influence from teachers under Act 10 because they have no essentially chips to put on the table in a bargain, right? The other piece that I think is really important to recognize that, well, first of all, so that makes the process go really, really fast, especially when we're offering the maximum allowed under the law in terms of an increase. So that's why one meeting and we're done. And that's how it goes right now. But it's also going all the way to the maximum, at least for this coming year. Who knows what it'll be when we start having that conversation later for the future. But one of our big goals is to try to get to a teacher salary that is average in our region, and going to 4.7% moves the needle on that. Offering the $1,000 retention bonus moves the needle on some of those pieces. In the employment summary, right? It's like, oh, this is related to me. So, right. So you'll notice in the public will notice that I've announced that I'll retire as the superintendent from our school district effective June 30th, 2023. This a little rumor got going over the weekend that I had suddenly retired. No, it's a year out to give the board ample time because there are going to be a lot of districts doing superintendent searches in this next cycle. And then a safety update. And so I'm going to turn it over here to Gail and Larry from our safety team. We're going to discuss part of a safety update in open session because we think it's important for the board or any members of the public to see that we're already, as we always do this time of year, but I think more so now than ever, really paying attention to safety and what are the opportunities for us to enhance safety in our schools. And so sharing some of that publicly, but if you have questions that start to feel like they're more detailed, I'm going to ask that you save those for closed session because we don't want to compromise safety efforts by sharing things that could be taken advantage of should somebody want to do something like that. So with that, I will turn it over to the two of you.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll do some brief introductions real quick first. Again, I'm Larry Lineberger and Gail is sitting next to me here. We are safety training leads. And I know via Zoom, Janet, our district safety coordinator, is joining us as well. Some of the things that we do are support our building administrators and their building safety teams with the completion of their annual preparedness requirements and really following Act 143 compliance. I'll get into that a little bit as well. That's really, so we support some of the training efforts that they would be doing for staff, students, and parents. We help them consider their drills, being announced, unannounced, doing some things like that, and then ultimately evaluation of those. And that'll be something we do in closed session as well. We do this by visiting with them first and second semester for safety reviews to really look at the requirements and then answer and Q&A with them as far as the preparedness efforts in their buildings or any specific safety concerns as well, so that they always have a plan with their team. And then we're just ongoing training and updates with principals. We'll be doing that first thing in August as the school year begins at the beginning of August with our administrators. So I mentioned Act 143, a little bit more about that. This is something that was passed in 2017 in response to Parkland, Florida tragedies that were there at Stillman Douglas. This in turn created an Office of School Safety that's under the umbrella of the Department of Justice. And in turn, they really created requirements and guidelines for school districts. One of those being safety drills are one of those requirements in which they require one safety drill per year. And in our district, we do choose to do two, one each semester. Some of the other requirements that we are required to submit to the Office of School Safety are our blueprints, our maps of buildings, so that there's awareness. Their school safety plans, school safety assessments, and all the training documentation that we're doing to that on top of it. And then, of course, the drills. Speaking about a little bit of like the school safety plans, that becomes our emergency operations plan. Some of the following resources are things that we do use. We definitely use a template that's fortunately provided by Wisconsin School Safety Consultants Association, their EOP template, which is aligned entirely to the Wisconsin statute for school operations. I mentioned the Act 143. Of course, we want that compliance, but we also pull from resources like the Wisconsin Department of Justice Comprehensive School Security Framework and their threat assessment protocol. Use that and REMS guidance as well. U.S. Secret Service reports for preventing targeted violence in schools. These are very kind of reflective research pieces of what has been successful in averting violence, or really kind of an analysis of violent acts that have occurred and what are best practices, then learning from those situations. We also really work to make sure that we're comprehensive in integrating our mental health into school safety. So we draw from some research that's available to us to do that as well as what Department of Public Instruction does with their mental health framework and culturally responsive problem solving guide that they're able to provide us to. So really our approach here in West Dallas too is we take an all hazard anytime readiness. We aren't able clearly to predict emergencies, so we need to be prepared before, during, and after school. You saw some of the things that we draw from. It really helps us heavily with the prevention part of this, with some of the programs, the protocols, the procedures, the policies that are put together by school board, our access control, I think of, and visitor policies. All of those are pieces of school safety. The SEL that we deliver, that's all part of school safety, connectedness to school. That's all pieces of prevention that we are involved in. The preparedness, that's the drills and training. That's doing that as required by law, and what else we choose to develop ourselves to. Our response, of course, then is when we have to change our routine because that emergency is happening and we get into just that immediate response. And I guess recovery then really begins at the same time. Once that crisis begins is when recovery begins too, as far as immediate mental health needs for people. It might even be as far as building structural type of needs. Teams are going to be coming together immediately to figure those pieces out, as well as the academic pieces and ongoing social emotional health. That's when you often hear counselors are on hand and the hours that they will be there. That's all part of our recovery. So I know that we wanted to provide a general overview of what school safety is regularly here, day to day, every day, before and after school. And I know we'll be in closed session for the drill evaluation too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
All right. Then we will move on to number 7, public comments. At this time, if anybody would like to address the board, there is a link in the Zoom chat. Please feel free to sign up. For the speaker, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. State your name and address when you do get called. A reminder, the board cannot discuss, debate, or act upon any item during the public comment portion of the board meeting. Follow-up to the public comments will be made by the superintendent by the next regular board meeting. All right, so far I have one name on our list, Jennifer Higgins.
Sneaking at the door looking nervous. I don't usually have to talk to adults, so at least not anymore than March at a time.
Can you
Anyway,
use the microphone and thank you.
yes, I can.
And state your name and address. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Higgins. I live at 13305 West Wilbur Drive in New Berlin. I'm nervous, but I'm lined up with the mic now. I wanted to make some comments related to the new status of the West Dallas District Theater Program. I think most people, well, you guys all know that the theater has now partnered with the rec department. And generally speaking, I think that is great. Combining resources, this ought to open up participation in musicals and plays to a lot more students. And that's great. That's the only way my kids have been able to participate in things. And we've done a lot of that. You can be guaranteed to be, to try and get you to buy a flower or bottle of water, you name it. So I've been the mom of a bossy penguin, a wise old gnome, seagull, I believe a pickpocket, and half the ocean this time on James and the Giant Peach. And that takes a lot of doing because you have, yeah. Anyway, it's no fun to be half the ocean. Anyway, so I have a particular stake in the intermediate school productions. As, like I say, I've had a kid, one or another or both, in all the musicals they've done at Lane so far, and our participation is quite guaranteed for the next several years. So one of the things I'm happiest about is the addition of an intermediate school play, as well as keeping 2 musicals going. I have some concerns though. I believe that one of the reasons for this change is to open up participation to more students, especially since the Frank Lloyd Wright, as far as I know, hasn't ever had a musical. And I don't know if the virtual students had a chance to participate in any of them either. This will certainly change that, but it limits participation of some of the kids who have been participating in the past. This is because Lane could do almost all of their practices at Lane, right there. So the kids just stayed after school and then parents would pick them up after practice. To continue to participate, those students will now have to find rides between the schools as well as rides home afterward. And that's going to be tough. Just trying to get kids from Lane to Hale for the last 2 weeks of practices took a lot of coordination and carpooling. I think there are parents that went back to get more kids, and that was just for 2 weeks. And Central is twice as far as Hale from Lane. Twice as far. Yeah, I checked. It's 1.5 miles from Lane to Hale, and it's 3 miles to Central. Participation for the Lane kids over at West is going to be worse. It's either 4 or 6 miles, depending on if you want to gamble with freeway traffic. But that is fair because the kids trying to get over to Lane or Hale or even Central isn't that close for the West kids. So I always thought it was a bummer already that the kids that were able to participate in theater, especially at the intermediate level, were the ones whose families could come get them after practice. In our district, I figured that's unavoidable. That's just how it is. But adding the extra complication of needing 3 o'clock transportation and then 5 o'clock transportation is really going to limit things for more kids. In theory, the Frank Lloyd Wright kids could walk to Central, but it's over 1 mile. It's not going to be fun. So those kids are still going to be left in a similar to as Lane students, which, like I said, they're kind of out in the cold. One solution would be an activities bus. At the very least, there would need to be a bus between Lane and Central, and there really ought to be one from whoever's hosting.
Okay, your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, activities and bus, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, one last call for any public comments. I'm not seeing any others who have signed up. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the board president's report. First thing will be the review of our board calendar. Today, Monday, July 11th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Immediately following will be a closed session meeting for school safety. Next week, Monday, July 18th at 6 p.m., we will have a closed session meeting that will be via Zoom only. On Monday, July 25th at 6 p.m., we will have a regular Board of Education meeting followed by a workshop for with our consultant, Melissa Madurazzo. And then on Monday, August 8th at 6 p.m., we will have another regularly scheduled board meeting or regular board meeting. At this time, we will move forward to our board committee reports. First on the agenda for today is our life readiness through college and career preparation. Ms. Steele.
All right, so we met this evening and we talked, first we just got an update about shared journeys. We currently have 2 students enrolled at shared journeys. And so now with Lisa Cola leaving or retiring, we're just kind of working with the board at the school, the charter, or not charter, what is it called? Their Their
Charter board.
Yeah, their charter board, I'm sure. It's been a long day. Yeah, their charter board and kind of working with them and figuring out staffing, who's going to take on the various roles that Lisa used to have and et cetera. Then we also talked about, so we did a first reading of several school board policies based on some recommendations from Neola. So we did one on curriculum development, which adds in the new language around the Holocaust and how it needs to be taught at some point, I believe at least one time in a student's career. We also had added some language to the human growth and development. I adds in information about abstinence, teaching about abstinence. Then there was just a few open enrollment programs, children at risk of not graduating from high school. Those policies is just basic changes from he, she, adding they in as language. And then the last one we talked about, it was, I believe, I don't have the name right here, but it looked at disease protocols or controls, and it adds in information about COVID-19 protocols and addressing pandemics and endemics in the future. So we did first readings of those. And then the last thing we decided, we didn't have a lot of time, so we are actually going to postpone and discuss on our August meeting, looking at the strategic plan and deciding what we want to really focus on for the next year. Any questions or things you'd like us to discuss in committee?
Yep. Ms.
I
Kaiser?
want to make sure that we have a discussion next time about the DLVA, just make sure we're on, keep up on enrollment and how the first year went.
Okay, anybody else have anything for the committee? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to 8.2.2, communication and community relations. Mr. Sikich.
Thank you. On June 27th, 2022, we had our Community Relations and Communications Committee meeting. We talked about our strategic plan goals and reviewed them. We also talked about what we would like school showcases to look like in the upcoming year as far as time and how many students, you name it, we're going to be discussing it. We're excited to continue to hear the more from the students than from anybody else. You know, years ago, it was just somebody from the school giving it a report. A lot more interesting when the kids are presenting to us. And the dates for those school showcases can be found on the board topics calendar. That concludes my report.
Okay. Does anybody from the board have any questions or other things that they would like for the committee to consider? Okay. Then we will move forward to any community events. Does any board members have any events that they would like to report on? Ms. Steele?
I just wanted to thank again Shelley Strasser and all the people that made the West Dallas 4th of July parade a great experience. I think there were 6 of us from the board that walked this year, so it was a lot of fun.
Great.
I
Mr.
would
Sikich?
echo those comments because it's the two best things about being on the school board is the Christmas parade and the 4th of July parade. That makes it all worthwhile.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you for those. All right, next will be our consent agenda. We have 9.1, the approval of minutes, 9.2, our employment summary, and 9.3 supplementary contracts. Does anybody need any of those items separated? If not, I will entertain a motion.
So
Move to
moved.
approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So if I could jump in here just for a second, we just figured this out, or Adam and Deidre did. Brandon Jarumba, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who is in our meeting of Zoom, was just approved as a teacher at FLW. He's a graduate of Central and came all the way through our schools and graduated recently from UW-Madison School of Education. So he's coming back to teach. And in his profile at UW School of Madison, it's clear that Brandon, this has been a passion for a long time that he wanted to be a teacher. So I just wanted to really highlight that. That's a pretty cool story. Oh, his dad is there. Oh, Scott Jerome was there too, apparently. So congratulations, Brandon. Welcome.
Congratulations.
retire now. Not now.
All right, we will move on to our action items. The first action item is the 2022-2023 academic standards adoption. Ms. Raymer and Mr. Henkel.
Good evening, everybody. So this is an annual item for us. Each year, we align the work that we do to standards. Nothing has changed about it from last year to this year, except one area. The Department of Public Instruction chooses a curricular area to review on a pretty regular basis. And when they update their standards, then we choose typically to align to the Wisconsin Department of Public Standards. And so this year, the only change in the standards we're adopting are moving from the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts to the Wisconsin Standards for English Language Arts. And so Adam will talk a little bit around what's different between the two sets of standards. And then the rest of the standards are pretty standard for us. They're either the national standards or they are the local state standards recommended by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. So for physical education and art and world language, we are aligned to the national standards. For social studies, they're the C3 framework. Science, it's NGSS, like all of those are kind of typical and the ones we've done year after year. The only shift this year is in ELA.
So DPI made some broad statements that we put in the exec summary around the different 5 components of reading. This has been, like Deidre had said, they pick one every they're on a 7-year rotation that they update these. So the biggest shifts that DPI has identified is learning about the application of reading, writing, and speaking. They're going beyond just text and understanding that, communication and speaking, obviously listening, those are all standards as well. So rolling that key language into the standards, which involves also key shift 2, flexible users of language. And then the third one is identifying those complex texts. So also comparing multiple texts together rather than just reading about something in one text and then being able to master a standard. It's being able to take in multiple sources of not only text, but also speaking and listening and comparing those. So adding a little bit more rigor and understand that in our world, probably from when these were updated like 2013, people are taking in information in different ways than 7 years ago. And then also the importance of providing that textual evidence in whatever communication that they're receiving, whether it's written or verbal, and then building knowledge through text. So you can see key shifts for Wisconsin all around the complexity of text, incorporating text, finding evidence in text as well, not just going in like opinion writing or things like that.
So similar to the shifts in social studies a few years ago that went to a push for more inquiry-based, more project-based, more UDL type work. That is how the ELA standards are just a bit more aligned to that application of knowledge. So that aligns very well to the work we do here in West Allis, West Milwaukee.
So our staff have been working on our guaranteed environmental curriculum documents in order to update these with the current framework. So they've been spending time all summer, K through 12, in that alignment process.
Which is why these were officially brought forward by DPI in 2020, but we did not make the decision to make that shift at that time because it does require us to make sure all of our documentation is uploaded and capacity of staff was not quite there yet. So we decided to dedicate some time to it this summer.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 10.1 passes. All right, next on our agenda is 10.2, Independent Hearing Officer Resolution for Expulsions. Dr. Lexman.
Yes, thank you. So this is another one of these annual items that comes around this time of year. And so a number of years ago, we changed the practice to having an independent hearing officer hear and facilitate expulsion hearings. And so it has been an attorney from Bulow Vetter. So it's our primary law firm that we work with. It's not the only one, but it's the primary one. But it is an attorney that does no other business with the school district except for being our independent hearing officer, so that it is truly independent. So you see Savion at times, you hear the name Dan Valita at times. Those are attorneys from Bulow Vetter that advise us. So if we had questions about preparing an expulsion, we wouldn't contact the independent hearing officer, we contact Dan Voigt or Savion. Just so the board can understand how this works. It's been an effective process for us, and it is what most school boards do, is to have somebody with expertise hear the expulsion. The expulsion doesn't become official until the board then takes action and approves it. But this is the way we've been managing the process side of it.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 10.2 passes. Okay, that is the end of our regular agenda. So at this time, we will take a 5-minute break before resuming in closed session.